I'm right here, and today we're going to be doing Unit 2, Notes 2. So we're going to be talking about graphing systems of inequalities. So today we're going to have to be doing stuff with shading. So let's go ahead and let's take a look at systems of inequalities. So a system of linear inequalities is a set of two or more inequalities on the same graph. Again, write down what you need to understand it. You don't have to write down all of it. Okay, the solution is the region where both of the inequalities are shaded. So if you'll notice, we have shading here and we have shading here. So right here, where the two overlap, is going to represent our solution, where the two shading overlap. So let's go ahead and let's take a look at what that would look like. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to graph each of these. So starting off, taking a look at this first one, I notice that we're crossing the y-axis at 1. Then my slope is -1, which is really the same as -1/1, which means from this point we're going down 1 and then right 1. Now I notice that there's no line underneath that inequality, which means this line specifically is going to be dashed. Okay, then the alligator is facing away from the y, which means we need to shade up. So I pick a spot on the line and I shade up. So what I like to do is I like to do just straight vertical lines, and you'll see why in a second. So that's going to represent the shading for that line. Now some students like to change colors to help them see. If you have multiple colors you want to use, that's great. So for this second one, we're crossing the y-axis at 3, which is right here. Then my slope is 2, which is the same as 2/1. So I'm going up 2 and over 1. So I'm going to have a solid line going up. Now I notice that again the alligator is facing away from the y, which means I'm going to shade down from the line. And what I like to do here now is I'm going to do horizontal lines, because what you'll notice is then where the two areas cross, I start forming boxes. So it makes it really clear to me where I need to shade. And I do suggest you shade it in really heavy. Okay? Now let's take a look at number 2. So for number 2, we're crossing the y-axis at 1. So we're crossing the y-axis here, and then our slope is 1, which again is the same as 1/1. So we're going up 1 and over 1. And that's going to be a dashed line because there's no line underneath the inequality symbol. So then from that line, I'm going to go ahead and shade up since the alligator is facing the y. Again, I'm just going to use those vertical lines. You don't have to do it that way, but it helps if you don't have two colors. So then the next one, we're going to cross the y-axis at -3. And again, my slope is 1, which is the same as 1/1. So I'm going up 1 and over 1. And I'm going to go ahead and connect those with a dashed line. Now since the alligator is facing away from the y, I need to shade down. Now if you notice, nowhere do those cross. Okay, there's no common shaded area, which for this means that there is no solution for number 2. Now let's take a look at number 3. Now in order for us to graph number 3, we're going to have to solve it for y. So let's go ahead and do that. We're going to solve this guy for y. So we have 3x minus y is greater than 6. So the first thing I want to do is get that 3x over to the other side. So I'm going to subtract 3x from both sides. So then I get -y is greater than -3x plus 6. Now I don't want to know that I don't want that negative in front of the y. So what I need to do is to divide both sides by -1. Now when you divide both sides by -1, you should have little alarm bells going off in your head that say, hey, I divided by a negative number. So then you're going to flip it. You want to flip that sign. -3 divided by -1 is +3x. And then we also need to take 6 divided by -1, which is -6. Taking a look at that other equation, we have 2x plus y is less than or equal to 4. Oops, and this one should have been greater than or equal to. Okay, so then we need to solve for y. So to solve for y, we're going to subtract 2x from both sides. So then I get that y is less than or equal to -2x plus 4. So now we need to go and graph this. When we go to graph it, we want to take a look at our final answer when it comes to shading. I don't want to take a look at the original one up here. I want to take a look at what the sign looks like when I've completely solved for y. So here we're crossing the y-axis at -6, and then we're going up 1, 2, 3, and over 1. Now that's going to be with a solid line since there's a solid line underneath it on our key. And then I noticed that at the final solved version, it's facing away from the y, so I need to go ahead and shade down. Then for the second one, I have y is less than or equal to -2x plus 4. So I'm crossing the y-axis at 4, and then I'm going down 2 over 1. And I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to connect that again with a solid line. Now I want to shade underneath. So notice that I make the boxes right here. So I'm going to go ahead and fill that in solid right there. So that's my solution in that solid shaded area. Now let's take a look at number 4. So for number 4, I have x is less than or equal to 3. Now if you'll remember back, whenever we have just x in an equation, that means that it is a vertical line. So I'm going to find where x is equal to 3, which is right here on the x-axis, and I'm going to draw a vertical line through it. So now I want to figure out which way x is getting smaller. Well, here we're going 3 to 2 to 1. So x is getting smaller going to the left. Since it's x is less than 3, I'm going to shade where it's getting smaller. Now we need to solve this equation for y, and really all we have to do is subtract x from both sides. So we get y is greater than -x plus 2. So I'm crossing the y-axis at 2, and then I'm going down 1 and right 1. And we're going to have a dashed line there. And I notice at the end it's facing towards, the alligator is facing towards the y, so I need to shade up from that line. So right here is where the two cross, so this is the region that I am going to shade in. Now let's take a look at this one. So now here I have y is greater than 3. So that needs to be a horizontal line where y is equal to 3. Well, here is where y is equal to 3. And I'm going to have a dashed horizontal line there. Okay? And then where is y getting bigger? Since the alligator is facing the y, we need to use greater than. And it's getting bigger above the line. So I'm going to go ahead and graph that. And then we're crossing the y-axis at 4. And our slope is -1. And that means that we are going down 1, right 1. And again, that line is going to be dashed. And since the alligator is, again, facing the y, I need to shade up from that line, which is on this side. So I notice that the two cross right in this region right here, so this solidly shaded region is my solution. I'm going to go ahead and have you guys try number 6 on your own. So let's take a look at some of these word problems. The most Jack can spend on bagels and muffins for the cross-country team is $28. So we have a minimum or a maximum of $28 for our price. So whatever we spend needs to be less than or equal to that $28. A package of 6 bagels, so I'm going to let X represent the package of bagels. And then a package of muffins, so I'm going to let Y represent the packages of muffins. So for every X package of bagels that I buy, it's going to cost me $2.50. For every Y package of muffins, it's going to cost me $3.50. Okay? So I'm going to go ahead, why don't you guys pause the video, and I want you to solve the equation I just wrote for Y. And when you solve that equation for y, it's hard to get the fraction for that one, so I'm okay if you write this. So what I did is when I divided out, I ended up getting -0.714. So for the purposes of this note video, we're just going to estimate that. Now we have 2 more limitations on our graph. The first is that we need to buy at least 12 bagels. So if we buy more than 12 bagels, that's a-okay. So whatever I buy needs to be at least 12 bagels, maybe more if I can. So for every X box of bagels that I buy, I get 6 of them from that information right here. Now we want to have at least 24 muffins. If we have more, that's okay too. So for every Y box of muffins, we're going to get 8 muffins. Okay? And then we need to solve each of those for X. So we get that X is greater than or equal to 2. Solve the second one for Y, and we get that Y is greater than or equal to 3. So let's go ahead and let's do some graphing. Let's start by graphing this equation right here, okay? So we're crossing the y-axis at 8, which is right here. Then we're going down negative 7.14, so that's almost all the way down 1, and then we'll just go over 1. Now that's going to be a solid line since there's a line underneath it, okay? And because the alligator's facing away from the y, for that one we're going to be shading down. Now let's take a look at this one. So now x is greater than or equal to 2. So we're going over 1, 2. And we're crossing the x-axis at 2. And then because it's just an x, it's going to be a vertical line at x is equal to 2. And we want it to be greater than 2, so we're going to shade to the right. So right now, this is our shaded region, but we're going to have one more limitation, and that's that y is greater than or equal to 3. So we're going to count up to 1, 2, 3, and we're going to cross that point right there, and I'm going to go ahead and draw a solid horizontal line right there. Then we're going to go up from there. So the area that all three are shaded is this little triangle right here. Now, any point in this shaded region represents a solution. So if you just pick a point in the solution, let's say we went over 2 and up 4. That's within the shaded region. So we could get 2 bagels and 4 packages of muffins, and that would fulfill our requirement. So any point in that region fulfills that requirement. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to get this one set up for you, and then I'm going to have you graph it. So Rondell makes $10 an hour cutting grass and $12 raking leaves. So he cannot make more than 15 hours per week. I'm going to let X represent the hours cutting grass and Y represent the hours raking leaves. So when you add the 2 hours together, that has to be less than 15, because he cannot work more than 15 hours per week. He could work exactly 15 hours per week. But then for every X hour he spends cutting grass, he makes $10. For every Y hour he spends raking leaves, he makes $12. And he wants to make at least $120 per week. If he makes more, that's okay. So whatever he makes needs to be greater than or equal to that $120. So I want you guys to go ahead and solve each of these for Y and then graph them. Now let's take a look at these where you have to graph a couple inequalities. So let's go ahead and get started with this one. So for the first one, x is greater than or equal to 0. So let's find where x is equal to 0, which is right here. And what we need to do is draw a vertical line there. So x is equal to 0 is really actually just the y-axis. And we want x to be greater than 0, which means that this is the area right here that needs to be shaded. Now I'm going to go ahead and use a couple different colors on this one so we can really see the difference. So I need to solve that one for x, and I'm going to use a darker color here, or for y, I'm sorry. So first thing I'm going to do is subtract x from both sides. So I get negative 2y is less than or equal to negative x plus 2. Divide both sides by a negative 2, and then when I divide by that negative, I need to flip my symbol. Negative x divided by negative 2 is 1/2 x, and 2 divided by negative 2 is negative 1. So I'm crossing the y-axis here at negative 1, and then I'm going up 1 and over 2. It's going to be a solid line. Oops. It's going to be a solid line, okay? And then since the alligator's facing the y, we're going to shade up. Next, we want to go ahead and solve that third equation. I'm going to go ahead and just show you the solved version. Hopefully at this point this is something that you're comfortable with. If it's not solving for the y, please let me know and I'd be more than happy to talk you through it. So I'm going to graph this one in purple. So we're crossing the y-axis at 3, and I'm going down 3 and right 4. Again, that's going to be a solid line like such. And then I noticed that my alligator at the final answer is facing away. Oops. And so that's going to be shading down. So the region where all 3 lines cross is this little section right in here. Okay. Last but not least, let's take a look at graphing this 4-1 right here. Okay. So x is less than 2. So first, since that's just an x, I want to find 2 on the x-axis, which is right here. And I'm going to have a horizontal vertical line. Now it says that x is less than 2, which means it's going to go this way because that's where x is going to be smaller. Now taking a look at the next one, I have y is greater than 1/4 x, and that's really the same as 1/4 x plus 0. So I'm crossing the y-axis at 0, and then I'm going up 1 and over 1, 2, 3, 4. Again, that's going to be a dashed line because there's no line underneath the inequality. Since the alligator's facing the y, I'm going to shade up from that line. Taking a look at my next one, y is greater than 2x plus 9. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to cross the x or the y-axis at 9, which is up there, and then I need to go up 2 and over 1. Well, I run out of graph room. So here's a hint. Going down 2 and left 1 is the same as going up 2 and right 1. So that's something you can use when you're graphing as well. So if that doesn't make sense to you, please come let me know and we can talk about it together. So there's my dashed line, and it needs to be greater than that line right there. Last but not least, we need to solve this last one for y. So I'm just going to kind of do that quickly here. Divide both sides by 3. I do not need to flip the inequality because I did not divide by a negative number. So here our y-intercept is going to be 3, and let me just change my color here. So we're crossing the y-axis at 3, and then we're going down 1 and right 3. Down 1, right 3. Now that line is going to be dashed. So I'm going to have a dashed line going down that way, and I'm going to be shading below the line. So that's a crazy mess, and so the area that's completely shaded is going to be right here. So you want to make sure that's really solid. So that concludes your note video for today, and thank you for listening.